I didn't do the project. I decided not to do the project, so I didn't do it. So we're not talking about doing a project. We're talking about not doing a project. That was a project that we didn't do. I didn't do. I decided ultimately not to do it. This was a deal that didn't happen. That was no deal. It was an option that I decided not to do. We had a position to possibly do a deal to build a building of some kind in Moscow. I decided not to do it.
The president's former fixer pleads guilty on a charge of lying to Congress about a plan for a Trump Tower in Moscow. The president yesterday denying he did any deal in Russia, but also saying there'd be nothing wrong with pursuing overseas business as a candidate for president if he had. We have new Twitter reaction from the president just this morning where he describes his behavior during the campaign as very legal and very cool. We'll explain that. We'll hear more from him live from Argentina at the G20 summit as well. The president landing last night after abruptly canceling a meeting with Vladimir Putin, citing Russia's aggression toward Ukraine. Good morning. Welcome to Morning Joe. I'm Willie Geist. We have a great group to tackle both intertwining stories this morning. Our Michael Cohen whisperers, Donnie Deutsch, and senior reporter at Vanity Fair and an NBC News MSNBC contributor, Emily Jane Fox. For the legal analysis, former Justice Department spokesman, now an MSNBC justice and security analyst, Matt Miller, and some of the best foreign policy experts out there. The president of the Council on Foreign Relations and author of the book A World in Disarray, Richard Haass, columnist and associate editor for the Washington Post, David Ignatius, and Washington anchor for BBC World News America, Katty Kay. Joe and Mika will be back on Monday. Richard, you thought you were just going to get yourself a G20, go down, have a couple sideline meetings, and get out of town. No such luck.
3 minefields in Buenos Aires. The Russian one, which something tells me we'll talk about this morning. Yeah. The Saudi one with MBS, the Crown Prince, trying to make believe that everything is normal. And then what might ultimately, in economic and policy terms, be the most consequential, the meeting between the presidents and Xi Jinping, and whether they can avoid taking the trade dispute to the next level.
We'll get into all of that in just a moment. But first, special counsel Robert Mueller's probe brought a charge yesterday that says Donald Trump was attempting to do business directly with the Kremlin at the height of the 2016 campaign. In federal court, Michael Cohen, former executive vice president of the Trump Organization and the personal attorney to President Trump during his first year in office, pleaded guilty to a single count of making false statements to Congress about the length and scope of contacts about a project to build a Trump Tower in Moscow, identifying the president as Individual One. The charging document says Cohen discussed the status and progress of the Moscow project with Individual One on more than 3 occasions, more than the 3 he claimed to the Senate Intelligence Committee, and he briefed family members of Individual One within the company about that project. Reversing what he told Congress, Cohen admitted he agreed to travel to Russia in connection with the Moscow project and took steps in contemplation of Trump's possible travel to Russia. And Cohen admitted he'd gotten a response from the Russian government when seeking assistance with the project, including from the office of top Putin aide Dmitry Peskov, and that talks about a meeting with Putin extended until June of 2016, 6 months after Cohen initially said discussions had ended. Cohen will be sentenced next Wednesday, December 12th. Here is the tweet I referenced from the president this morning. He wrote this while at the G20 in Argentina, quote, "Oh, I get it. I'm a very good developer, happily living my life, when I see our country going in the wrong direction, to put it mildly. Against the odds, I decide to run for president and continue to run my business. Very legal and very cool." Talked about it on the campaign trail. He goes on, lightly looked at doing a building somewhere in Russia, put up 0 money, 0 guarantees, and didn't do the project. He finishes by saying, witch hunt. Compare that to what the president said repeatedly during the campaign and in the early days of his presidency.
I mean, I have nothing to do with Russia. I don't have any jobs in Russia. I'm all over the world, but we're not involved in Russia. I have no relationship to Russia. I don't deal there. I have no businesses there. I have no loans from Russia. I have nothing to do with Russia, folks, okay? I don't have any deals in Russia. I have nothing to do with Russia. I have no investments in Russia, none whatsoever. I have no dealings with Russia. I have no deals in Russia. I have no deals that could happen in Russia because we've stayed away. What do I know about the Russians? What do I know about the Russians? Then they said, He borrows money from. I don't borrow money from the Russians. I promise you, I don't have any deals with Russia. I had Miss Universe there a couple of years ago. Other than that, no. I have nothing to do.
So Matt Miller, the president, now says, okay, I, quote, lightly looked at doing a building in Moscow. Maybe all those things I said in the early days of my presidency on the campaign trail weren't true. We looked at it. There was no deal to be had. It fell apart. We didn't sign anything. We didn't do anything. So as you look at this in sum total within the context of the Mueller investigation, where's the link between President Trump and potential collusion, for example?
Well, so I think the president's right in one sense in that it would be, very legal for him to work on a real estate deal with Russia. I'm not sure it would be very cool to be doing it while you're running for president and while you're talking about changing American foreign policy and while you're lying to the American people about it. But where the link would come back to the case that Mueller is presenting. Look, I think when you look at everything that was going on in the summer of 2016, it wasn't just that the president was secretly negotiating a real estate deal. It's that he was doing that at the same time his son and his campaign manager and his son-in-law were meeting with an intermediary for Russian intelligence in the search for dirt about Hillary Clinton. It was at the same time as he was changing the Republican Party platform to make it more friendly towards Russia. It was at the same time, as we found out this week, his outside advisor, Roger Stone, was getting a heads up about the exact timing and content of the WikiLeaks dump, which of course came from hacks done by the Russian government. So when you add all of this up, there's always been this question: why was the president so friendly towards Vladimir Putin during the campaign? Why was it that he was publicly praising Vladimir Putin and publicly talking about reorienting U.S. foreign policy towards Russia? And now what you see is the beginning of a quid pro quo where the president might have had two things he would get in return. One, help in his campaign, and two, personal financial dealings that would help his bottom line.
And David Ignatius, as you've outlined in a piece some time ago, there is a history of President Trump doing business in Russia, and the problem here would be now you've got somebody on the other side in Vladimir Putin who sees it in his own interest to put Donald Trump in the White House and to help that effort, and that's what Mueller is looking at right now.
What I found, Willie, a year ago when I looked as carefully as I could at this story is that Donald Trump has had a 30-year obsession with building a big project in Moscow. It's been a passion. It goes from Russian administration to administration. He's gone to Moscow a number of times. On this reporting, I went to Moscow to the very spot where he would have built the office tower that he dreamed of. Somebody else built it that time. Each of these deals kept falling through, but the passion on Trump's part remained, and he transferred it, in effect, to his children, who were also very eager to do this Russian business dealing. To discover that somebody who has kept saying, I had nothing to do with Russia, no Russia, no, was talking until June of the presidential campaign year with Michael Cohen about all the ongoing discussions and was getting word back from Vladimir Putin's spokesman, Peskov, about the Russian side's willingness to enter into conversations really is quite striking. I think we're now at the beginning of the endgame of the Mueller investigation because we're finally, with individual one, Donald Trump, at the center of what this story has been from the beginning.
And Cohen now saying those discussions with Russia went into June of 2016 when President Trump had well cinched the nomination to be the Republican nominee for president. Donnie and Emily. Donnie, I'll start with you. Let's talk about Michael Cohen's side of this. This is the guy who said he'd take a bullet for him. A father figure was Donald Trump throughout his life to Michael Cohen. Another step for him in turning against Trump.
Yeah, before we get to Cohen, this is, and I've been talking about this ad nauseum for the last 2 years, this has always been about follow the money.
Yeah.
And this has always been about failed casinos in Atlantic City 25 years ago where Trump could no longer get money from anywhere, from any bank, save a little bit from Deutsche Bank. And for 25 years, I believe it's also been talked about, but it's going to be the tip of the iceberg, his financial relationship, his financial dependency on Russia, right. The oligarchs of Russia, of trying to end the Magnitsky Act. And this is just the beginning. You're going to see a man with all kinds of nefarious ties, financially dependent, period. And this is the first chip to fall. This is the big tower. There are going to be many more towers to come. As far as Michael Cohen, and Emily knows this also, we've watched an arc of Michael Cohen, as you said. First, I will take a bullet for him. I mean, so committed and loyal to this man. Obviously, we saw him arrested. We saw that turn with Michael Cohen. I have never seen Michael since this began feel the way he's felt the last few days. I've spoken to him many times the last few days, where I think for the first time he really feels, look, he's still been found guilty of something. He's still probably going to serve some jail time, but he really feels he's on the right side of things. He really feels not only is he doing something for himself and his family, it is starting to feel, you know what, I'm on the right side of things. I'm not the bad guy, if you will. I'm not on that team anymore. And on a very personal level, he feels like it's been he versus Trump. You know, he's left out by himself, hang out to dry against the most powerful man in the world, against everything. And I think finally he feels he can stick his chest out. And I know Emily has been speaking to him also. Very different tone of him in the courtroom and just the way he's conducting himself.
And Emily.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.